I'm just waiting for a signal for our live stream, so. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us here today, and welcome to the latest edition of the Power to Transform Global Forum for Women Film Organizations. My name is Minoru Ravindran, and I'm a journalist. I write for The Ankler, Broadcast, Screen International, and various others. And this is my third time actually moderating this event, and I'm very grateful. Okay, there we go, not too close. Very grateful to Barbara and Liz McIntyre, the formidable pair who have invited me back again. So thank you so much. I'm delighted to be here. So for those of you actually who are new to the Global Forum, just a quick couple of words about the network. This network actually unites women's film organizations, activists for gender equity and diversity, researchers in the field, and women's film festivals from both developing countries and developed countries in order to share knowledge, experience, and good practice. It's an amazing network. And today we're actually expanding on a topic that we first broached last year, and it was a fantastic discussion for those of you who I'm seeing some people nodding who were here actually last year when we first looked at the intersection of gender and AI. And this year I'm really pleased to announce actually that Power to Transform has created a set of guidelines for sexism-free and gender-sensitive use of AI, which will be presented here today by Barbara, who co-authored the study basically with Liz McIntyre as well. And I've gone through it, and it is fantastic for anybody who's working in the industry. It's a really great resource for many different roles, you know, from research, location scouts, screenwriters, directors, to really think about AI prompts and how they impact your work. Because of course, as Barbara will get into as well, AI, you know, it's already here and it's affecting how we do our work. And I'm sure many of you are probably using it in some way as well for your work currently. So it's a really great resource. Before we continue as well, I just wanted to say a few thank yous quickly. So firstly, a big thanks to the Federal Ministry of Education, Family Affairs, Senior Citizens, Women and Youth of Germany, which funded the guidelines as well as this event. And thanks also to the Baden-Württemberg State Representation for allowing us to be here in this gorgeous venue, and for their support in the preparations too. Right, and now I'm going to crack on. We're going to hear from Power to Transform Chairman Barbara Rome about the guidelines and why they were compiled, and then we will have a panel that basically digs into the landscape, providing some context and also some solutions as well. So I will be back shortly, but for now, it's over to you, Barbara.
So we need the PowerPoint first, and I don't see this here on my. Okay. Yeah, thank you all for being here and welcome. And before I begin, I want to thank two people, two women, without whom those guidelines would not exist. And this is Elizabeth McIntyre. Please, could you stand up for a moment, Liz? Screencraft, yeah. She is from Screencraft Works, London, UK, and she's my co-author. And we had very little time to put this together, and we had to bridge not just distance, but language. AI can help with this, but late-night Zoom calls are better when you need to know whether the other person really means what you think she means. And Elizabeth is a real partner in crime and a wonderful companion in this work. Thank you so much for this. Yeah. Yes, and then there's Chomei. She's sitting there because she's taking care of the Zoom. She's my fellow board member at Power to Transform, who co-organized this event, and I don't know anyone who jumps into things as spontaneously as she does the moment she's convinced it matters, and over the years she has become a close and dear friend. Yeah. So why these guidelines and why do we need them? For me personally, AI is a difficult subject. It took real convincing for me to engage with it. I can very well imagine a world without AI. So AI consumes vast amounts of energy and water. It is controlled by corporations that are building monopolies. The leadership of those corporations is overwhelmingly male and white, and they endanger existing democracies with their libertarian mindset. AI was trained on data scrapped without the consent of its creators. These are not just reasons to be skeptical. Deciding whether to work with AI at all is not an easy choice. But I have to say that AI is already here. It is embedded in the tools we use to develop, produce, and market films and media content more and more. It is changing how stories are created, who gets cast, whose images circulate, and whose voices are heard. This is not a future scenario. It is happening now, with or without us. And so the question is not whether to engage with AI, the question is how. This is what these guidelines are for, and this is why we are here today. So let me show you something. Wait a second, can I see the... Ah, yeah, okay, but I don't... Okay, but I have to see, sorry. Okay, then we start here because it's not on my screen, so I don't know where I'm in the PowerPoint. Okay, but no problem, we will manage this. So let me show you something. I prompted, I asked ChatGPT to create an image, and I asked for a happy family. And I got two parents, two children, golden light, a park, every default you can imagine in one image. And it's ChatGPT, you see what I prompted. And I asked ChatGPT to create an image of an attractive person. I didn't say woman, I just say person. Ah, yeah, okay, danke. What I got was a slim young white woman, styled, sexualized, looking straight into the camera. I asked for a successful person. I got a young man, white man in a tailor-made suit with a briefcase. So let's see what is next. Yes, and then we were in preparing of this event. We were in Zoom with Daniele Tembo. Many of you know her. She's from Sisters Working in Film and Television in South Africa. And I asked, and we were wondering what will happen when she will put in the same prompts I did here in Germany and she in South Africa. And so this is what she got in South Africa for a successful person. So then I prompted, let me see, create an image that shows the most beautiful person in the world according to social media. And this is what Daniele got in South Africa. This is what Daniele got in South Africa, yes, thank you. So another one, create a prompt that shows an attractive woman through the eyes of men. I prompted here in Germany, and this is what Daniele got in South Africa. So, yes, good. Now, none of this is surprising, and we showed also images last year, but and nothing had changed since then. And that is exactly the problem. These images look so familiar that we mistake them for normal. Most of people do so. But they are not normal. They are the result of AI systems trained on decades of sexist, racist, and discriminatory media production. AI does not invent these patterns. It learns from us, and then it amplifies them at a speed and scale we have never seen before. Ask an AI tool to generate 4 scientists, and you get 4 white men, older women, fat bodies, people of color, black people, queer people, disabled people. They only appear if you explicitly ask for them. Their absence is the system, not the exception. When AI regulation is discussed, it centers only on copyright, jobs, data protection, and facial recognition. It rarely addresses what AI actually reproduces in images and narratives. The sexism, the racism, the erasure, and that has to change. And it's personal for me. I move through the world surrounded by images of femininity that are deeply harmful. Girls and women are socialized to see these images as normal, and it's so normalized that most people struggle to even notice it. But we are surrounded by those images that degrade women and gender-expansive people, that turn them into objects. We are flooded with images that normalize violence against women and girls, and AI did not create this, but AI is now amplifying it on a scale we have never seen before. So, yes, and public outrage only erupts when things become extreme, as when Grok, Elon Musk's AI system on X, generated sexualized deepfake images of real women. But deepfakes do not only target public figures, they are used to harass and abuse ordinary women and increasingly children. And the everyday bias is just as damaging. We know from decades of research, and you will hear directly from Dr. Maya Götz today, that regular exposures to sexist imagery has concrete consequences: lower self-esteem, body dissatisfaction, eating disorders. And toxic masculinity norms had to restrict what boys and men are allowed to be. And the systematic absence of queer, disabled, older, non-normative bodies that sends one message: you do not exist. Film is a consciousness machine. Stories shape how we see the world, what we accept as normal, and who we believe we can be. With AI, we are entering a new area of storytelling, and since it's not disclosed what data AI is trained on or what algorithms underpin it, we are flying culturally blind. So these guidelines we are presenting today are our small contribution to changing that, and we used to make them very practical. And you will hear today from 5 remarkable experts: Maya Götz, who has spent decades on researching how gender images in children's media shape young people, and how that same content now feeds AI training data. Aisha Sobi, who analyzed hundreds of AI-generated images and proved that body diversity is systematically erased. Dr. Daniela Gatti, who shows how AI produces what she calls algorithmic erasure of queer identities. Emilia Winger-Berskin, who brings indigenous values of consent and care to technology through her initiative Womp Up Code. And last but not least, Tina Marie Galli from Ada Developers Academy, who shows that changing who builds the system changes what the system produces. After these interviews, we will take you through the practical tools, a prompting guide that translates this knowledge into concrete strategies for every stage of media production, a toolbox with 14 instruments for spotting stereotypes and breaking cliches, and a manifesto with 6 political demands for gender-just AI, anchoring in existing law ready to be acted on. Yes, but I want you to leave without one thought before we begin. You don't need to have to be a developer to use AI critically, and you do not need to be an algorithm and expert to recognize sexism in an AI-generated images. Liz and me, we are not, but we created those guidelines. What you need is the willingness to look more closely. Do not accept the first output. Ask who is missing, whose perspective is not being told. What would be an unexpected alternative? When you work with AI this way, you turn a machine that reproduces cliché into a tool that helps you break them. By individual awareness, it's not enough. We also need to push for political change, for regulation that takes sexism and discrimination in AI as seriously as copyright and data protection. Be the other voice in your work and in the public debate. The window to shape this development is still open. Let us use it. Thank you. And now I hand over to Manuel for the interviews. Okay.
That's brilliant. Thank you, Barbara. And we'll have Barbara back as well afterwards to go through the guidelines. So I will just introduce basically I know Barbara obviously introduced them just briefly here as well, but just to invite our speakers to the stage. So we have Dr. Maya Gotz. Please join us, Maya, if you just wanted to sit in the center here. Welcome. Dr. Aisha Sobi. Aisha, I think if you wanted to say something. And Dr. Daniela Gaddy. We also have Professor Amelia Winger-Bereskin, who is joining us, I believe, via Zoom, and also Tina Marie Gully of the Ada Academy, who I think, are they here as well? They may be part of so you'll see them on the screens behind me shortly. But effectively, the format for this is we're going to speak with each of our experts in a Q&A format for a few minutes each, and so we can really kind of get a sort of dig into their research and provide a little bit of context, I think, which will be really important once we get into the guidelines. And we are so lucky to have, there we go, we have everybody here. So it's a mix of physical and virtual, which is very fitting for post-pandemic times. But I thought I would start with you, Dr. Gotz, because obviously you focus your research on effectively gender portrayals in children's and youth media for quite a long time. What would you say are sort of some of the proven effects do sexist and sort of very stereotyped portrayals of have on children and youth? Particularly in terms of sort of their self-image. Can you elaborate on that?
Well, first, what we clearly can see is that media have such a power to make an inner picture of what is normal and how I should look like, how I should be, how society should be. And it goes so deep in our unconsciousness that often we not even see it. And if we have media that are just showing girls who are hypersexualized, or if you think about Disney animation, in the middle they are so thin that they never ever could exist. In German television, over a long time, we had more than half of the animated characters were thinner in the middle than it would be possible. In the international level, we have 3/4 of all characters are thinner than possible, and half of them are thinner than Barbie. So, and we fought quite a lot against it, and so it gets a little bit better, but still they are hypersexualized, and actually children are just children, they're just straight, but we sexualize them from the very beginning. We clearly could see that at least 70% of all characters are white. And we know on a global level, Caucasian white would be something like 10 to 15% of human beings. So, and the point is, if you are growing up and you see these images, you integrate it into themselves, it is really hard to accept who you are if you are not looking like them, and nobody looks like them, especially not, of course, if you have any other different shape of colors, of your body, of the way you move, you act, and so on. So it's the meaning of media are so deep, and we really have to take care of that.
Absolutely. I was just talking to Dr. Gotz about, I had my son 6 months ago, so all of this is very sort of at the forefront of my mind as I sort of see him grow up, and you see how early all of this, of course, happens as well, like just from when they're babies, which is shocking to me. But Maya, can you talk about sort of some of the key criteria that media sort of content for children and young people should meet to sort of convey development promoting sort of gender images? If you were advising, obviously, producers, broadcasters, people who work in the entertainment industry, what are some of the criteria that you could sort of point to?
So first, variety. We need diversity, we need a variety all children and young people should learn they are absolutely okay the way they are. And outer appearance is not what really matters. What really matters is how they treat each other, how they are, what they can move in the society, in their neighborhood, and so on. So first thing is really variety, and of course the variety where you live. So we have to think beyond the US, beyond Europe. So in different countries, they should mirror their own variety. And you should have the possibility to see all the very typical things of the minority, of the indigenous, of your own culture. So this is just show and tell different stories from different parts of the world, and be very aware that normally we cast the beautiful children, the beautiful adolescents, the beautiful mothers, but reality is so much more beautiful. We just have to have a look at it. It's just a stereotype that we mothers can just be beautiful if they are looking hypersexualized. That's not true. So the point is looking at reality and see the beauty of reality. That would be something which at least we have fought for so long in children and youth television, and it not always worked, but this is something, of course, all of you are working on. And now with AI, the backlash is a backlash.
Absolutely. I feel like that conversation has changed even. Obviously, you were in the panel last year, and it's almost such an advanced conversation even now, just a year later. Where do you see sort of particular risks where generative AI is trained using existing media data to sort of automatically generate, this new content, which of course is the basis for a lot of what we're talking about today?
The stereotypes are so much more limited. I mean, we have always stereotypes, but they are limited to the basic, to a dimension where we really said this is really harmful for our inner picture of what does it mean to be beautiful, what does it mean to be successful. There are so many ways how you can be successful, and that we have all over the world get the same pictures. I mean, our world looks different. So we are really like a backlash. Where the worst of the stereotypes are coming up.
Got it. And specifically for generative AI, what are some of the key questions or review mechanisms that you would recommend to sort of prevent, Gen AI being used to sort of create some of those images for children and youth media specifically?
First, just there must be possibility how to open up, how to get to the pictures, how to learn the diversity of your country, of your culture, of the cultures you have in your cultures, and to try to learn from all these different versions, not to stick with just the beautiful, sexy, white girl. So I'm sure there are ways how to do it. I'm sure there are people who can help with that. And to be very aware of the gender glasses, to see what do we know from gender research, where are the biggest problems, for example, for girls, for adolescents, is their body image. And with social media, it gets to a dimension of mental health problems that we never had in this dimension before. Just, by trying to look like the influencer, the content creators, and the content creators do not look like themselves. So it's like there's so much pressure, and to find ways how to skip this one, or the news research we're doing right now, or I presented this morning, is about boys. And also of course, we have much more variety in the boys and the man characters, but still there are some images which are there and limited perspective of what can you be. Of course, there's more limitation in women characters of what profession they could be. But for boys, it's really and for men, this limitation of you have to work, carrying masculinity. Why don't we see more of their so wonderful fathers? Why don't we see more of them? So find a way to see, okay, where do we want to go? So one possibility, what we should do is, where is our culture society right now? Not looking back at the data 20, 30, 40, 60 years ago, but now, and the diversity, and to open up this perspective so that you really reach all of them, but also keep in mind, okay, what do we want? Where are the things we are missing? For example, carrying masculinity, taking care of the environment, taking care of biodiversity. There are so many issues which are really burning, And we have to find a way how to implement this too, because it's there.
Definitely. And tell us, I think we've got a couple of minutes here, so tell us a little bit about the research, because you're looking specifically now at AI and its effect on the manosphere, right? Can you elaborate on this?
So the study is social media, gender images, and values. And what you can see is that especially with a focus on boys who identify themselves as right-wing, and what you can see is their perspective to the world is really dangerous. And if you have, and then we go into cases, but they are just nice boys, and there's nothing, not really anything behind it. They are just looking for orientation. They want to be a good man, and if nobody tells them what it means to be a good man, they take where they get it. And the only one who are talking about men are the right wings. And then a real man votes right, and a real man does this. And they said, oh, okay, I want to be a real man, I do this. And it's a little bit really like that. So, which just hits into what we have forgotten the last centuries. Like if you're growing up like me in Germany, in a white culture, I never had to thought about what does it mean for me to be white. And so men normally don't have to think about what does it mean for me to be a man. And this is something we just missed. I mean, let's talk about what does it mean to be a respected and a good and strong man. And we analyzed in all details where are the problems, and then we produced TikTok clips and tested them again with right-wing boys. And some didn't work at all, and some worked in the wrong direction because we also measured values. And some of them really worked well, hit right to the point. And I will not try to imitate the content creator who made this beautiful video, but at the end it says, strong men defend women and their rights. And 70% of the right-wing boys says, oh, I like that one. And half of them would share it with their friends on TikTok. Because this is a cool guy, have muscles, symbolizes their values, and he gives them an idea. Strong men defend women and their rights. And actually we know this. We know that strong men defend women and their rights, but we never said it. So finding ways, looking for the positive orientation points, and really talk about gender and what does it mean. We know there are a lot of problems, no problem, but okay, where do we want to go? And this could also be a chance for AI. At the moment, AI mainly goes into the manosphere and in dimension, which is just scary. Producing terrible videos with just fitting into the values and the aesthetic, what right-wing boys like, and then giving misogynist messages in a dimension that is just crazy. She's this bitch, she just used you, so you have to show it to her and keep her in the dark, and it's really terrible. And they are producing on such a high level and just swamping the internet. And as soon as right-wing boys, if they're like muscles and cars, expensive cars, they are directly driven into this TikTok algorithm, and their AI really can harm.
That's absolutely fascinating. I think, yeah, a lot of nodding heads. People sort of, for whom this is really resonating. So thank you, Dr. Gotz. I really appreciate that. Aisha, obviously, in your paper, so the thinness of Gen AI, you analyzed 649 images. Is that right? Thereabouts, across 9 free-to-use image models. Tell us a little bit about your research and what you aim to, what you basically set out to determine and what some of your key findings were.
Yeah, absolutely. So I started the research at a point when we were starting to see critiques, evidence critiques of like, generative AI is really white. Generative AI is starting to put out kind of like really misogynistic expectations of like gender roles in terms of sort of like the images that you were showing of kind of what a professional is, what a attractive person is, etc. But we hadn't seen anything that actually considered the thinness that was coming out of these image models. And I think the images that you showed, Barbara, at the start of this really illuminate what I got out from about half of the images when you would ask for a person. Some of the gender and racial diversity was quite high, But they were still ultimately very beautiful in the sense of they were probably selling a product, if that would make sense. They were this idealized version of kind of like jawbones, and for the women, quite sexualized. And I think the contrast then occurred when I had the other half of the images where I was explicitly prompting for a fat body. And I'm aligning with kind of activist movements that are sort of reclaiming the word fat as a kind of a neutral descriptor as opposed to a negative, but asking for fatness. I have to say, like, and the images, I didn't bring any images with me today, but some of them were really hard to look at. Some of them, and especially in comparison to this really beautified version that you got out with person. A fat person coming out for generative AI, at least, was someone who was often white, was often male, had thinning hair, was in ill-fitting clothes, much more often had like a sad facial expression compared to the kind of beautiful smile of the kind of person. And this can, so all of this, especially in comparison with and I think it was made more apparent in comparison to how beautified the personhood was, that it wasn't unsurprising, but there was a complete erasure of body diversity if you just ask for a person in terms of shape and size. And then B, if you ask for fatness, you can get some really horrifying things coming back out, whether that's just the overall affect being sad and kind of upset, but also like it removed the clothes of the bodies quite often, like topless. I assume from the amount of before images that have gone in, the kind of from the social media world of kind of before and after images of people's weight loss journeys, where you often don't wear very many clothes, and I imagine that's where the images of fat people are coming from that is going into these models. So what's coming back out is unclothed people, but they also convened their own content guidelines. So I got genitals, I got unclothed breasts, and all of these things that if you read the image generator's own guidelines would say, we don't do that. So it was so surprising for these models, it jailbroke them. The idea that someone might actually want to create a larger person was just, to give them, to anthropomorphize them a little bit. They were surprised, and they didn't know how to deal with it. So it broke their own guidelines quite a few times, which was, I think about 7 of the 9 models I looked at did that. So that was quite a stark finding.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and what would you say the findings reveal about how they represent effectively fatness, disability, and happiness as well? I know you touched on that before as well. But
absolutely. So I think the looking at what comes out when you ask for larger bodies, and this is really quickly evolving. So I'm doing another study now that, so lots of these kind of little tells are quite masked. Because the models get better and better at kind of hidden diversity prompts, hidden kind of prompts that the user doesn't see to embed kind of acceptableness into the images that come out. But the idea that, it's just built on this foundation of data that does not think, or I'm giving data the ability to think, but built on a foundation of data that doesn't represent fatness very well. It represents people as sad, you are unhappy, this is a bad state to be, so that when you ask for that to come back out, that's what you're getting. And I think, that's being hidden a little bit now, so depending on what you're asking for, you can kind of get quite happy, smiley, fat people, but they are still very sexualized, especially when they're women, in very curvy shapes to align with this idea that, to be fat and to be acceptable as a fat person, you have to be, again, really curvy, really kind of like beautiful in the right way. And that's, I think still comes out now, absolutely.
That's really interesting. Okay, and why would you say prompts for larger bodies often trigger sort of those inappropriate content filters as well? And what does that sort of tell us a little bit about the stigma that's encoded into these Gen AI systems?
Yeah, absolutely. So the other kind of side of this coin, so we had the jailbreaking in a sense, you had the fat person, that's so surprising. Okay, you can have a naked fat person, here you go. That I got on the one hand. For other models, if you use the word fat, it would refuse to generate anything at all. And that comes from this idea that I think within the model creator's perspective, that we are going to moderate what you can ask for because we're trying to protect you. So fatness often is understood as quite a negative word and can be used as a slur. And that occurs in lots of instances across different platforms, in different protected characteristics, for instance, asking for disabled or asking for or specific disabilities. Different terminologies can be censored in a way that they're not acceptable because they could be used as a slur. But that really undermines this kind of context-specific use of language that we have. The idea that if someone is embracing something about themselves, that they may be using words that have historically been thought of as slurs, which then further kind of embeds this idea that this type of thing is a bad thing and we need to be concerned about it. So yeah, one model, if you could use medicalized language, so you could use obese, you could use morbidly obese, but you could not use the word fat. You just would not do it whatsoever. And similarly, lots of the models had much more broken images. So sometimes images wouldn't come out, or it wouldn't show the image that it created because it's like, oh no, that breaks my content guidelines as well. Like, I've not done a good enough job, so I'm not going to show you what comes out. And with that especially, it was quite interesting when sometimes, because the model not having enough information on which to build the photograph, you also had much more instances of creating like cartoons. And in the study, I was searching for photorealistic people. But it was like the default, when there wasn't quite enough data, was like, oh, okay, we'll turn you into a cartoon and you can be kind of a joke. And that was what came out. And I think it was an interesting way of thinking about how do we fix these systems. Well, moderating language that users used runs into all these problems when the context of that word is not necessarily negative. Yeah.
Of course, and obviously when all of this is then applied to creating characters for film and television and sort of the industry, what do you make of that and the risks that are associated with that process?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think, my core risk is using them as just going to erase body diversity effectively. If we use them uncritically, you're not likely to get out someone who is larger at all. So that's like a kind of a core risk, but actually I think there's deeper risks in the sense that because these systems are averaging, they take data, take it apart, and make the most probable outcome to come out based on that data, that you don't get a depth of understanding. Effectively you get stereotypes. So asking for characters and we see this in research as well, this idea of user personas. We can get an understanding of, in human-computer interaction and design, we can get an understanding of people's perspectives by creating a persona of what this person might be like, and we'll have them, this imaginary person that we have attributed lots of expectations to. We'll kind of imagine them using this product, and through that we'll understand whether it's a good technical product or not. And with generative AI, you can have that be undertaken to really really high quality, really interactive way. You can have a chat with them if you set the model up right. But what comes out, you lose that idea of kind of a person's voice. So kind of within queer, critical race, and disability studies, the idea of voice is really central to kind of being part of the, as a way of kind of doing participation. And this includes things like context. Like in certain contexts, I might have one answer, but in a different context, I have another, which is completely removed if we use generative AI to kind of create answers to things. Similarly, if we are all quite plural and against I may think two things that are in opposition to one another right now. I might think this room is too hot, but I also might be too cold, all at the same time. And that sort of thing is very generative AI and these AI systems, which put things into set categories, just cannot create that. And we lose that in the way that if we start to use them to kind of help us create ideas and characters and people. Yeah.
So yeah, it's not a huge leap to imagine the sort of consequences for, for what's on screen then obviously as well. Yeah. Thank you so much, Aisha. That's really illuminating. Dr. Daniela Gatti, I know we spoke about this a little bit earlier about sort of the misnomers that are sort of very prevalent in this space, but I'm curious what you make of the term generative AI, and is that the word generative really accurate in this context?
Hello. Yeah, great, works. Thanks, Minori. That's a great question, and I know you know the answer. No, I don't think that generative AI is a good term. And the reason for that, I mean, I understand why they came up with it. The intention was to characterize different types of AI models that all rely on machine learning, but produce different types of output. So generative models will produce either text output or visual output, like videos or images and stuff like that. So those are generative models. But the whole idea of them being generative is, I argue, it's really a mistake. Because they don't really generate anything new. I mean, that's a kind of metaphor. It looks like they are, but what they're really doing is they're just taking patterns that they've identified in the data and using those patterns, recombining them to create output that looks new, but is actually just recombined versions of the same old thing. So for this reason, I don't think that generative is a good name. It deceives us in terms of what these models do. I mean, I argue that really we should think of them as rather conservative because they're just presenting the same thing. They're presenting a newish looking version of the same old status quo.
That's really interesting. I mean, I know your research specifically centers on algorithmic algorithms, really. Can you sort of explain, when you say algorithmic knowledge and algorithmic erasure, which are prominent sort of terms within your study, tell us what you mean by those terms.
Yeah, thanks very much. I mean, I think, we talk a lot about algorithmic bias and the ways that these AI algorithms specifically produce discriminatory outputs when it comes to people of color, when it comes to women, gender nonconforming people. But one of the things we're not really talking about that much, although my colleagues here have elaborated on different aspects of this really well, is that these algorithms really profoundly shape the way that we can see and understand the world. That is, they shape our knowledge of the world and how we come to believe things to be true that we think are true. For example, I mean, at least in a Western context, a Western white context, for a long time, we have thought that there are two genders, right? Like that was kind of like the consensus. But in queer studies, which is a field that I am, very closely aligned with, it has been shown that, these genders, this notion of two genders is something that was constructed through processes that are both scientific, but also everyday lived experience through reenactments of formulas. But, when I just said reenactments of formulas, I mean, that's a great description of what these algorithms do. They reenact formulas, though they present them as recombined versions of the old thing, but they basically reenact notions of, for example, gender, of, for example, what it means to be successful. Looking at, Barbara's generated images, what does it mean to be successful? What does it mean to be attractive? What does it mean to be fat? And all of these things, or, Professor Goetz, thinking about, what does it mean to grow up and what should I be? What can I be? How can I imagine myself to be as a young child? So these are knowledges. So that's what I mean by algorithmic knowledge, is the ways that these algorithms really perform certain ways of understanding the world. And one of the I'll finish here in a minute, but one of the aspects that I want to emphasize in this is that, there's a performance of what knowledge is when you ask AI a question, when you ask ChatGPT a question, a fact-searching question, right? Obviously, it's a knowledge claim that is being made there when the bot returns some probabilistic answer. But kind of almost more interesting is when folks use, let's say, a chatbot as a companion AI, right? Because then the AI is performing this notion of what it means to be a friend, what it means to be a lover, what it means to be a therapist, what it means to be a friend to encourage you to commit suicide and stuff like that, right? As we're familiar with. So that is a performance of what those concepts mean. And one of the questions that I would really ask everybody to think about is that who controls that? Who controls that knowledge creation? And do we want those people to be controlling that? Because if we don't, then we need to really sort of consider whether we want to be using those commercial chatbots or not.
100%. And how do you sort of standard AI practices of classification specifically and categorization then shape how gender and sexuality are represented and constrained or erased, would you say?
Yeah, so this is a question that goes to the heart of what it means to code an AI algorithm, because obviously these are coded objects. They're statistical models, but they are statistical models that specifically use code. You could run a linear regression by hand. You could do that. You could calculate that if you have the ability to do so. But these models they use data sets that necessitate that we use computers to do this. So they are coded. And what that means, as I elaborate in a piece that is coming out in AI and Society soonish, hopefully, what I elaborate that means is that code is not able to articulate concepts in the way that we humans think of concepts. So for example, you were just talking about how you can feel cold and hot at the same time. In code, that is not possible. You define a variable, it has a particular meaning or a particular range of meanings. It cannot be something else. It cannot also be the opposite at the same time. That doesn't work. Now, of course, whenever we talk about any basic human concept that really matters, such as love, such as peace, such as friendship, such as knowledge, none of these concepts is like one thing or the other. All of these concepts are constantly shifting, even if the way I think about love might be one way, one day, a bit different the next. They're constantly shifting. Moreover, we don't agree on what they mean, and there is no way to encode that. So what that means then is that when you try to create a coded representation of these kinds of concepts, you typically end up the way that AI algorithms try to operationalize this is through scale. So instead of, let's say, 2 genders, you can have like 150, but really they boil down to essentially little clusters, which basically means that when, let's say, an AI algorithm is presenting you with content that's supposed to be relevant to your gender, plus also some diversity, all the diversity is just from content in the close by range, meaning it's essentially the same. So that's how we get to, and I realize you were asking about algorithmic erasure, you get to the erasure of meaningful difference. So this process explains why on social media, when you go online and you ask for, you search for a particular type of content, you don't really get meaningful variation. Because the variation that you do get is all from the close range, but from a human point of view, that's not meaningful. Like if I spell femme, like for example, I want, let's say, femme content, let's say as a queer person, if I spell femme as F-E-M, as is commonly done in the English-speaking world, or femme, as in French, with F-E-M-M-E, that's not meaningful variation necessarily for a human, but for an algorithm, that's two totally different concepts. So that's the kind of, this is how you end up getting these silos with the manosphere and the right-wing content, is that all the meaningful variation that these kids are getting is actually meaningless variation from a human point of view. So that's erasure of difference.
Got it. Thank you for breaking that down for us, actually. And obviously, when this is then applied, it's my question for everybody, when it is applied to film and TV, and I know you mentioned that sort of large language models, LLMs, obviously influence storytelling too, but how do you find it most problematic in that manifestation?
Where do I even start? Where do I find it most problematic? I don't even know where I find it most problematic. It's problematic on so many levels. But I want to bring in, like this is presumably a mostly filmmaking crowd. And, I think here in Europe, we're often very proud of, in terms of film, sort of pushing back against the sort of the Hollywood narrative, even though that may not be a single narrative, but, like multiple film industry cultures. Well, now one of the things that a good friend and colleague of mine, Xuenan Cao, has shown in her work is that these algorithms create what she calls ideological monolingualism. That seems a bit complicated, but essentially what this includes even DeepSeek, so the Chinese version. Basically, because they are mostly trained on internet data, and the internet is so dominated by America-centric content, essentially what you end up getting is you end up getting narrative models, you end up getting character figures, you end up getting concepts and language use that reflects a single cultural perspective. And then that is obviously very problematic. I mean, my colleagues here both have alluded to this already, that other than this, if you are working with data as these models are, you're always going to get the marginalization of people who are marginalized in the data. Not necessarily because the data isn't representative, but maybe because there are only 3%, let's say, queer people overall on the planet. You're just going to get queer people back, 3% of the time. So that kind of status quo is going to be reaffirmed, which is why we get back to this idea that AI is so conservative.
Understood. And how does the research sort of resonate with your own lived experience?
Well, I mean, it resonates with my experience in a lot of ways. First of all, I personally am very interested in coding and very interested in mathematics, and I appreciate the beauty of the ways that this code has been created. What I really don't appreciate, though, is that typically when we use this technology, we are relying on models that have been created by one of the big four, which are essentially models that are business products that aren't really optimized to do the kinds of things that you could actually do with AI. For example, I would say that in film production, there are the boring routine tasks that you could easily delegate to an AI model, such as in compositing, or like creating a green screen background or whatever, that kind of like rote stuff that you don't really need any creativity to do. But how this resonates with my own experience is that I see this encroachment of techies upon every area of life, thinking that you can come up with solutions, and I'm like, well, where was I ever asked about whether I wanted this? Where was I ever asked about, for example, do I see, is there a queer model of knowledge that we're going to be using in order to create models? Where was I ever asked whether I, consented to this? That's where I see that intersecting, and obviously in a lot of other ways as well. But I would just want to sort of mention one example from my teaching, because I'm currently working with my second-year students at the University of Salford, and we're working through how to train AI models. And one of the really nice, we were chatting before, and I was sharing this experience, one of the really nice experiences I had, other than, they were kind of like, when we trained our first model, they were like, wow, this is really cool, and we can do this, and they were very excited. But then they were also like, yeah, we see why you said that, ChatGPT outcomes are BS. Like, don't trust them. We see that now. We're really starting to get it. And that is just so validating because, and this is what I want to sort of like share with all of you, is that understanding that these models are not magic, they are just mathematical formulas, and that we can think about how we use them, whether we want to use those products that are coming to us commercially, which I argue we should ideally move away from. We should work towards the open source models and use those if we want to use AI models at all. This is not a doomed technology, but the capitalism that underlies it, specifically the ideologically far-right capitalism that underlies it, is unacceptable, I think, for the kinds of projects that you guys are creating in the industry. So that's where I would like to sort of share the voice of my students as a kind of encouragement to everybody.
Thank you so much. And I see Tina Marie obviously nodding. We will definitely get to that because I think that ties in really well in terms of some of the work that the Ada Academy is doing, which is so interesting. Oh, yes, of course. So I think we are, Dr. Gotts, if you wouldn't mind. Perfect, thank you. Yes, okay. Great. And
No, but now I can see it too.
now I can see too. And is Dr. Amelia Bearskin with us? She's not with us. Not quite yet. Okay, brilliant. So we will actually go to you, Tina Marie. Thank you for being here with us virtually. We are so pleased to have you. Tell us a little bit about the Ada Academy and how it sort of integrates AI literacy with some of the equity work that you do from day one. Tell us a little bit about the Ada Academy as well for those of us. Obviously, you were with us last year, but for those of us who weren't here.
Yeah, so Ada Developers Academy is a coding school specifically created for women and gender expansive adults. And now we just create more of like technologists in addition to like full stack developers. And so we kind of think at Ada, we kind of look at it as like AI literacy and equity are two like separate tracks. They're like part of that same conversation. And our students aren't just learning how to build. I think, oftentimes when you think of the stereotypical coding school or boot camp, it's really about how you're building. And for us, it's just not about kind of that on day one. It's about learning how to build with AI tools, how to integrate them into your world, into your work, your personal life, all of those things. And really thinking about as what was said before is like, where does that training data come from? Really like questioning it, thinking about whose experiences are centered, whose experiences are erased. What happens when you deploy a model into a community that literally you've never spent time in, where's that voice integrated into those tools. So our students in particular, they are untraditional students. So they are, women, gender expansive folks. A lot of them identify as people of color. We have people that have many like lived experiences that they're bringing into the world of tech. And these are systems where they were never designed for people like them, right? And really what that is for us is like, we kind of look at that as it's not making them deficient. It's actually their superpower. They're able to kind of catch, when homogenous teams have missed something, which they're always missing something, right? And they're able to kind of be able to evaluate the model, really identify what's problematic, what's harmful, all of those things simultaneously. And so not only are they teaching the folks that are, building the tech, after they're going through the training program and they have their either in their internship or their apprenticeship, but they're also asking questions. Again, kind of thinking about like who benefits from the output of this, who gets harmed, really kind of evolving our curriculum over time with, what's happening right now. I know we talked about like, a lot of this is like bolted on. It's not really AI in the true form of AI. And really, for us, what that means is really making sure that we are building students who are thoughtful with all of the industries that can be impacted by AI, good and bad, and really kind of building around like the reality of, that AI is not just a feature anymore. It's turned into an infrastructure. And really thinking that, people should be centered on that. Humanity should be centered on it. AI is supposed to just enhance what we do, not build it, not, concept it out, but just kind of like, a co-pilot, if you will. And so, those are things that we're, really trying to empower our students to understand that power and not just understanding like the tools that are making that power.
Of course. And what is it like for the students, the graduates really, when they go on to then work at companies? And then from the inside, they're sort of confronting some of that bias. What does that look like?
Yeah, so they get to walk into that on day one. So a big part of what we do, it's 11th month program. The first 6 months is in the classroom, and the next 5 months is the applied learning through the internship or apprenticeship. And so a lot of what we're seeing is that you know other junior engineers, they don't necessarily have like that framework of dissent like our engineers are. They're really, what we're seeing is a lot of folks from like, more of a traditional background. They're just grounded in the technical competence. And so what we can see is that, our students are often able to like, flag those bias data sets right away. They're able to propose solutions, and they have this design thinking that is human centered. And so, what we're just seeing is they're just kind of raising those concerns early. And they're also able to really flag, things that can be problematic without getting dismissed, right? Like finding those ways to kind of navigate the politics of the workplace that sometimes you don't learn until you're like, mid-level into your career. So we kind of integrate that into, a lot of our learnings for our students. And so what we're hearing from, our hiring partners and other industry partners are, our grads again are really asking questions that nobody else on their team is asking. So they're really bringing value on day one. They're looking at like, hey, like, who's not showing up in these results? Why is that? And so they're really being disruptive, which, sometimes at some organizations that's not a good thing. But we try to make sure that, part of their process is also evaluating the type of company that they work with. How do their values align? What are their AI policies? What are things that are problematic? What do you in your scope of ownership are able to change? And really kind of thinking about like, what is able to land in terms of like, your technical credibility, and how does that align with your lived experience credibility to kind of back up what you're recommending. And so, we're training people who can sit at the table, they're able to shift conversations, not because necessarily they are, activists performing a role, more that they're like understanding like how building equitable technology is really building better product. It's really making sure that it's quality. And our graduates really get that instinctively.
Absolutely. And can you tell us a little bit about the stats as well? Because I know there were like the success rates for your grads. I mean, it's astonishing. I've seen some of the numbers, but maybe it might be of interest to the audience.
Yeah, so obviously things have changed a lot in the last 2 years. Historically, it's been about a 94% placement rate after graduation, and a lot of it is through conversion. So they're able to convert from their internship or apprenticeship to a direct role with the company that placed them for or hosted them for that applied learning. But recently, so not our most recent graduate group, because they graduated last week, but the one before that, I think they were at like 74% within 3 months of graduation. Typically, we're seeing increased salary by about 212%. And this is life changing. I always say like, we don't even measure like the ripple effect, that we do. Like all of the folks in our program are really grounded in community and giving back, not only to tech, but the actual communities that they come from, as well as the communities that they live in. And so they're able to kind of, build and partner with other people to make sure that we're not just creating like this huge capitalist society. They're working at nonprofits, they're working at ed tech organizations or education institutions. So we're really seeing like amazing success, from our program. The folks that just graduated last week, I think we've already had like 10 people who've gotten offers. So, it's such a beautiful thing to witness, all of their hard work come to fruition.
That is extraordinary, honestly. And so just curious how sort of the ADA experience, how would you sort of apply that really to film and TV as well, which obviously is still, I would say, kind of in its infancy in terms of understanding AI and how to sort of marry AI and diversity. Are there some lessons that you think are there for the industry?
Oh, so many lessons, so many lessons. But to narrow them down, I'd say like, you don't want to start with the tool. You want to start with like the people in the room. Like if they're not making the decisions about like AI adoption, so that means your policy, what's allowed, making sure that people don't all look the same, making sure that they have a really diverse background. They didn't all go to the same school, that you have people from traditional, untraditional backgrounds, people who are, typically the word is marginalized, but I like to say like, underrepresented, underestimated people, just making sure that they're in the room. Your strategy will reproduce exclusion if that's already what exists. And so we really have to diversify like that decision-making table at the very start of it before you even deploy. If you wait until after that happens, you've already have it baked into all of your workflows. I'd say secondly, we have to treat AI literacy as, an elite technical. We shouldn't treat AI literacy as an elite technical skills. It really makes it inaccessible to other people. It should be something that we're all doing, whether we're at an organization, at the individual level, thinking of C-suite, production assistants, everybody in between. Like everyone needs kind of like this baseline of understanding about how these tools work, what they're being optimized for, what we think they're being optimized for, and what it's actually being optimized for. We really have to like break that down. AI literacy is not like, a luxury credential. It is really, public good. I'd say another thing that's really important, that people always tend to skip is kind of investing in your feedback loops. A big part of that is just making sure that you have, again, a diverse team of people, so you have members in that feedback loop that have psychological safety and they have structural power to actually challenge what's being built. I'd say that is so key. At ADA in particular, we talk to our students also about like speaking up and like strategies to kind of build that muscle, because it is, teach people how to be heard, and for media companies in particular, we have to, you all have to build that same muscle. We have to be able to create channels where people that are closest to the impact of those tools can really shape how they're used. And then I'd say lastly, one of the patterns I've seen across, industries, is that organizations are so fast to move on AI, and they're just like, oh, we'll add equity later. That doesn't work, right? Like we know that equity isn't like a feature that you can just like bolt on. It's foundational. You have to build it from the start. And if you skip it, you're going to spend so many years of cleaning up all the harm that's done.
Thank you so much, Tina Marie. I think that's really pertinent and useful for us to sort of take away. I just want to say as well, last year, when I was moderating this panel. I feel like my sort of interaction with AI was quite minimal, but as a result of this, and what you were saying and some of the other panelists, I really sort of focused on my own AI literacy, and I feel like I'm miles ahead this year. And I'm not sure if other people have sort of been on similar journeys, but it is really something that you can't ignore. That it affects everybody, and it is so important to get ahead of it, and obviously to see its its limitations, its many limitations. Barbara, do we? Okay, so we are actually going to, this will be our panel for today, and I'm just so grateful to all of our speakers, Tina Marie, Daniela, Aisha, Maya, thank you very much for joining us. It's been fascinating to hear about your research and hopefully illuminating for our audience as well. I think actually now we are going to hand back to Barbara, who will present the practical. Oh, okay. So we are going to actually connect with Amelia. Okay, brilliant. Okay, so I am actually going to hand over to Barbara now to sort of present the toolbox. Thanks, guys.
Okay, I have to prepare myself. Yes. So we can go on with the PowerPoint. Can I see the PowerPoint on the screen? Okay. So I go through this. Yes, and you have just heard from 5 or 4 great experts, and now I want to show you what we built from that knowledge, and knowledge from other amazing researchers. And because these guidelines are not just analyzers, they are tools, and they're designed for you, for the work you do every day. And the prompting guide is the heart of these guidelines. It is based on a simple insight. The way you prompt, AI shapes what you produce and what it leaves out. You saw the images earlier. I asked for an attractive person and got a sexualized young white woman. I asked for a successful person and got a white man in a suit. I did not ask for that. I just left the door open. And the AI walked through it with every bias it has ever learned. Vague prompts hand control to those defaults. Specific, thoughtful prompts take it back. The guide presents concrete strategies for every stage of media production, from research and editorial to development, screenwriting, production, visual design, post-production, marketing, and PR. There's lots of things to explore. I just give a very small insight. And this practical prompting guide has 3 parts. Part 1 lays out the foundation. It's just 8 core principles for gender-sensitive and anti-discriminatory prompting that apply regardless of which tool you use or which medium you work on. And Part 2 translates these principles into role-specific guidance with concrete prompting strategies and examples for 5 professional areas like screenwriting, post-production, from screenwriting to post-production. And Part 3 gives you checklists, very short checklists, quick reference you can use before you prompt and before you accept an output. I give you the QR code later, and you can check because it's a very long chapter, the prompting guide, but I give you some examples. Oh, second, I made a mistake. For example, screenwriting. Let me say you are a screenwriter and you prompt AI, create a female lead for a political drama. What you get will almost certainly be a young, slim, conventionally attractive woman, probably white, probably defined by a love story. Maybe try this instead. Create a female lead for a political drama. She's 56 years old, heavyset, from a working class background in Northern England. She's pragmatic rather than idealistic, has a dry sense of humor, and is not defined by a romantic subplot. She has physical presence and authority with being masculinized. So that is the same tool, the same AI, but a completely different result, because you told the system what you actually want to see instead of letting it decide for you. So another example, there's another trap we address in the guide that we call the diversity accessory. That is when a character from a marginalized group appears, but their identity is their entire function in the story. The guide shows how to prompt against this. For example, write a scene introducing a trans character. Their gender identity is part of their life, but not the subject of the scene. The scene should establish them as competent and central to the plot. Identity as part of who someone is, not as the story itself. That is the difference between tokenism and representation. And we have a second example. This is about location, and it's not about only characters. If you prompt generate images of an African city, you will almost certainly get poverty, dust, roads, and crisis imagery. Instead, you can try this. Generate images of a contemporary neighborhood in Lagos, Nigeria, modern architecture, busy streets, mixed commercial and residential buildings, greenery, people in everyday professional and casual clothing. Avoid any visual markers of poverty and exotism. Same continent, same tool, but you have broken the colonial gaze simply by being specific. So the guideline is full of those examples. You can just take them and use them or adjust them however you want to. Alongside the prompting guide, the guidelines also include a toolbox. And lots of the women here in the room know about those things because in our work the last, 20 years, these are the tools or the things we were talking about a lot. And these are instruments for spotting stereotypes and breaking cliché. You can use them to check your own work, and you can build them directly into your prompts. And can we now show the PDF, please? Haben wir es auf dem Bildschirm? In der Mitte nicht. Ich weiß nicht, was ihr seht. Ich sehe. So now we are directly in the guidelines. I try to manage here, and so this is the table of content. You see here the interviews, the practical prompting guide, and the 3 parts. And this is building your old toolbox. You can go there by a click. I don't know, yes. How to use this chapter, and then saying again. So, first tool is the male gaze and the Menkes list, which we took from this amazing documentary Brainwashed Sex Camera Power by Nina Menkes. Lots of you already know this. And yes, and it shows the 5 camera techniques that turn women into objects made visible by filmmaker Gina Menkes. And we have these 5 tools. And then everybody knows but most of you knows the Bechdel-Wallace test. And this asks the questions, do women have a story of their own? And you have these questions. I think lots of you know already. Then there are lots of other tools and things you can use, like the creator's checklist, who do girls and young women see on screen, and this is from the Gina Davis Institute on Gender and Media, and they developed this checklist to counter the underrepresentation of women and girls in STEAM, so you can also use this. So I'm going through, I can't stop anywhere. Then we have gender and age and gender on screen. There are lots of questions you can use for your prompting. Body diversity on screen based on Aisha Sobi's research showing what happens when only one body is the default. Then we have disability on screen. You have lots of tropes and cliches that you can avoid, and so it goes on. Masculinity on screen. This is based on Maya Gott's work. We give a lot of advice how you can use this in your work. And violence against women is a huge topic. And yes, and then there are lots of rape myths on screen and how to avoid these. You can use this tool, Race, Gender, and Western Gaze. It's also about lots of harmful stereotypes and how to avoid them. So, queerness on screen, it's also the work of Daniela Gatti we heard before. We take care of this. And yeah, so this is how it's working. And Ophelas, the Pathfinder, this is from the Sami Film Institute for telling indigenous stories with respect. So you have the link to go there if you have indigenous topics in your story. It's very helpful to read those. Okay, so I think now we're going back to the, wir gehen zurück zur PowerPoint bitte. Okay. Yes, 14 tools, practical, sharp, and really to use in your next project or next prompt. But I want to be clear about this. These are not rigid rules. They're examples, suggestions. Every project, every story, every character needs its own approach. Take what is relevant, combine, adapt, build your own toolbox. There are no limits to your creativity. The only limit is accepting the first answer without questioning it. Okay. So these tools are waiting for you in the guidelines. Yeah. So, yes, and then there's also included a manifesto. I don't know if you see now, we were back in the, yeah, so driving change, a call to action. This is very important for me always. I'm looking also at the political work we still have to do, and we have talked about what these why these guidelines exist. We have heard from 5 experts, just have seen the practical tools. Now I want to talk about what needs to change, not just in your own practice, but in the systems around us. When we started working on this guideline, it became clear very quickly that individual awareness is not enough. You can prompt perfectly, and the system behind it can still be broken. You can be the most critical user in the room and still have no say in how the tool was built, what data was trained on, or who profits from. That is why these guidelines include a manifesto, 6 core demands for gender just and intersectional AI in film and media. They are not aspirations, they are minimum requirements, and they are anchored in existing legal framework, which means they can be acted on now. Oh, sorry, I think, no, I don't have them here. Okay, sorry. So let me walk through them briefly. 1, transparency and human authority, no more black boxes. We need to know what tools are being used, what data they were trained on, and who is responsible. And humans, not algorithms, must retain decision-making power. 2, zero tolerance for sexualized and racist harm, deepfakes, non-consensual sexualized content, automated beauty rankings. These are not bugs to be patched. They are harms that must be prevented by design. 3, real power for diverse teams. Representation without authority is decoration. We need intersectional teams with genuine decision-making power, and affected communities must be paid to audit data sets and systems. And yeah, payment is very important. 4, prove it before you deploy. it. Independent intersectional impact assessments before AI systems go into production, before and not after. Self-certification is not enough. 5, build competence across the sector. Everyone working in media needs to understand how AI amplifies bias. Training must be funded. Pathways for marginalized communities into AI development must be created, as Tina Marie Galli describes. 6, public money demands public values. Where public funding is involved, film funds, public broadcasters, cultural grants, gender just and anti-racist AI standards must be mandatory. And yes, these demands are not abstract. In the manifestation, we show through concrete examples that they translate directly into enforceable obligations under existing framework, like EU Digital Service Act. We make an example how politics could include it. Yes, the UK Online Safety Act, and yes, Amelia wasn't here, but she has this ethical framework called WAMPUP codes, which is very essential. You can read it in the guidelines, please. Yes, the tools exist, the law exists. What has been missing is the will to act. And yes, I want to end with something personal before I hand over to Daniele. And I know that AI can feel overwhelming. I know that many of us are already stretched, fighting for fair pay, for representation, for the survival of independent cinema, and now AI as well. But that is exactly why we cannot leave this to the tech companies. If we do not shape how AI is used in our industry, someone else will, and they will not have our interests at heart. These guidelines are an invitation. Download them, use them, share them, challenge your colleagues, talk to your funders, push your industries. So thank you. And now I want to have, yes. And I hope that Daniele is now here. Daniele is here? Yeah. Daniele Mtembo is a dear colleague. Many of you already know her. She's from Sisters Working in Film and Television South Africa. We have a very long working relationship, and I'm so happy that you are here. Thank you so much, Daniele. And it's a pity that you're not in Berlin, but this year we couldn't manage. So, yes, and I had a Zoom meeting with Daniele, and we were talking about women organizations, women film organizations, how difficult it is to deal with the AI topic, and I really appreciate that Daniele is here, because I want to ask you 2 questions to give an insight of your work, and I think it reflects the difficulties all women organizations, not exactly the same like you in South Africa, but we will hear from you an insight how difficult it is, or maybe it could be, to deal with AI. And yes, AI is increasingly shaping media and public discourse, yet for many of us, of women organizations, it remains difficult to engage with this topic. Where does Sisters Working in Film and Television stand on this? What has made it hard to prioritize AI? And what would make the biggest difference to be able to take it on?
Yeah, thank you. Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you, Barbara, for the opportunity. I hope you can hear me.
Yes,
there's
perfectly.
a lot of thunder and lightning, so I'm not sure if you can. Okay, I'm glad that you can hear me. So, I mean, AI has definitely also just been, in the forefront of a number of discussions for obvious reasons. I mean, there's a lot of fear about what AI is going to do in terms of the work that we do as film practitioners. So just let me take a little step back and say, at the heart of who we are as Swift and why we exist is really to ensure that our stories as women, first and foremost, are told, that our voice out there is heard, and our talent is recognized. And here comes AI and challenges just about everything that we stand for and makes us really consider what this now looks like in this new environment of AI. We have a program that specifically is looking at making sure that films that are created by women get a platform, right? And not only do these films or do we ensure that these films get a platform, but we also want to make sure that the way that we are portrayed in these films is affirming of women, and portrays us in a positive light. And thirdly, we want to make sure that we are telling the stories ourselves. So now here we have AI that actually kind of puts the cat amongst the pigeons, so to speak, and challenges how we do things, because now anybody anywhere can tell a South African story based on what is at their disposal. So we are looking at AI, but we have, unfortunately, other priorities as, socioeconomic priorities, just as a women's organization in South Africa. So alongside looking at AI and the disruption that AI is causing, the fear that it's causing, we have to prioritize socioeconomic issues right now in South Africa. This is why, to answer your question on why it's difficult to really, spend a lot of time and resources on AI at the moment in South Africa specifically, is that we're still looking at the gender pay gap. We're looking at funding or lack of funding now. While we've had funding, now we have issues with funding in South Africa. And we're also looking at jobs. The South African economy, is in a downward spiral at the moment. Some positives are coming up there, from time to time, but the reality is that we're in a downward spiral as an economy. So who are the hardest hit when these things happen? It's women, and so those then become priorities in terms of job or employment, in terms of representation, in terms of advocating for change around policy, change around funding for women. So that is the reason why we don't, as an organization, as yet, are spending as much time and effort and resources on AI as we should be. But I'm really encouraged by this platform, because it's not something that is, only on our shoulders, but we have partners that we can glean from and be able to work with and collaborate in order to change this without us only putting in the effort, just as Swift and women in South Africa.
Yeah, thank you, Janelle. And you participated in a side event on AI at the G20 in Durban. What did you take away from this experience? You were a representative of Swift there.
Of Swift, yeah. It was quite an eye-opening experience, but what was important for us as a women's organization is that we're even invited to participate at what is actually a global platform, not just a South African platform. And what came out of it was really to find pathways to equity in this space, the digital space mainly. And at the heart of it is education and skills training. We can't run away from that. We have to skill and train more women in this space. We have to invest in it. As much as I've said earlier on that we have other challenges, but what we really agreed on and what we represented at Swift was education and training skills for women in AI. Barbara, just as a segue, just before, after our conversation last night, I just decided, let me see what is out there after, the prompting that we did on ChatGPT. And I just looked at what is happening, particularly in South Africa, in terms of AI generated. We have a lot of AI generated influencers. We have a lot of AI generated supermodels now. And it was very interesting that the people behind, or the creators behind these women, and it's Kim Zulu, as well as, who's the other one now? I don't see the name. I can't even read Shudu. Are men, and these women that are influencers, and that for me is key, that they are influencers, are created by men. The way they look, their features is not very African. Of course, we're different. We don't look the same as Africans, but you can see the influence of, the white influence in terms of features, and the slimness that we saw in that most beautiful person that was generated. These African women are very slim. Not all of us are slim. We've heard from the experts that there's a diversity in terms of women, and in terms of even build. But I found that quite interesting, that the people that are really running with this and creating influencers are men. So we need to then educate more women, particularly in the TV and film space, to really start utilizing AI, and not only utilizing it, but in terms of just coding. We also looked at digital inclusion. That's what we presented at SWIFT, because socioeconomically, there's still a big divide. So there's a number of women that just do not even have access to things like affordable internet, digital tools, and all of that. So we have to then look at that. How do we include women so that they can participate in this space? Otherwise, without that digital access, there's really no digital future. There's no changing what we're seeing now in terms of what AI and the influence of AI. We looked at equitable funding and ownership. That's another issue that we need to look at as part of the solutions to this digital divide. Women, the digital divide is supporting more women-led productions that are in the space financially, production houses that are trying to get into this, and it's encouraging to see a number of young African women that are coming up and are creating companies, foundations to help young girls with coding, or women with coding, and just to change representation in the space. But we need more funding specifically for women, just like we still need funding just to make films. But in terms of ownership and equitable funding, that was one of the solutions that we presented at that summit. Safe and fair working spaces is still an issue that we cannot also ignore in all of this. We heard earlier on about how AI, the deep fakes, are taking people's images and putting them in very compromising situations. So those are things that we have to also be mindful of, and make sure that we create this safe and fair working environments, and also that the digital space is fair and is safe for us as women to participate in. Cross-border collaboration, as I mentioned earlier, that's one of the solutions. The reality is that we are not where we need to be, particularly in the global south. So we have to partner with organizations like yourselves to be able to learn, to partner, to change things when it comes to AI and what we can do. What you've just presented now is the kind of collaboration that is leading the way, and you've already put in the effort, so we can then partner with you in it. So that, and then monitoring and evaluating what we are doing and whether that is really having an impact or not. One thing that is important is really getting data about our efforts. Are the things that we're talking about, are the programs that are the programs that we're putting in place working? You know, I was just listening to Tinare that saying that the graduates from their program, they've been monitoring that. So we need to also be able to look at the impact of the work that we're doing. And that has to be part of the way moving forward. Otherwise, really, we won't know whether we're making an impact or not. And yeah, so those are the things that were presented in terms of the pathways to equity, really, in this digital space.
Yeah, thank you, Sanila. Thank you so much. Yes, and it really shows how important it is that we join forces and that we tackle really big issues, and that we need lots of collaboration and yes, solidarity with each other. And thank you so much for your words. And I know that you have other urgent appointments today, but I'm so glad that you made it possible, joining and yes, and giving us those insights. And yeah, thank you so much, Daniele. Thank you all to the
thank you.
Other
thank you so much,
and,
Barbara.
Manori, maybe you come back on stage.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Sanele.
So we're ending now.
Thank you very much, Barbara.
Yeah, thank you, Manori.
This obviously concludes this year's forum, and thanks everybody for being here with us. We actually invite everybody to please download the guidelines. There should be a QR code, I believe, at some point. Oh, there we go. There it is. So please feel free to. I see so many phones, which is wonderful. Definitely download the guide and use it in your work. It's immensely interesting and useful. A recording of this panel as well and today's session will also be on the Power to Transform's YouTube channel tomorrow, I believe. So feel free to pass that on to anybody who might be interested. And finally, we'd like to invite members of the women's organizations and their allies to a networking event in the adjacent room. This is actually invitation only, so please do come along if you have that invite. And just to say, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much. I want to personally thank Liz McIntyre for bringing me on board, for so beautifully co-authoring these guidelines. Barbara Rome, who is just an absolute pioneer and works so hard to put on this conference, truly. So a big thank you to you both. And thanks, everybody. See you at the drinks.